It's just a pumpkin.
Director and co-writer Justin Harding brings us Carved, and this Halloween themed movie is about a killer pumpkin. Not a guy with a pumpkin on his head, we are talking an actual killer pumpkin. So what is the story? Well, it focuses on this kind of rural community who are having a kind of celebration, and it's a kind of local event where people have come in and they're carving pumpkins. That's a kind of you know, an activity to keep this kind of local small community engaged and things like this. We've got the local news there covering it. But one of these pumpkins may have been affected by this chemical plant which had a spill and has given it some type of sentience. And this pumpkin does not take kindly to people carving up other pumpkins for fun and games, and decides to go on a bloody rampage. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So this movie is a lighter movie. It's a comedic kind of somewhat of a goofy horror film. I would say it probably would have been like a Goosebumps style family horror film, but there is quite a lot of F-bombs in the movie, and there is a reasonable amount of people getting speared through their head with vines and things. So it's kind of a lighter touch, but it still has elements here that maybe aren't great for younger audiences, so to speak. What can we say that works in this movie's favour? A fun movie antagonist, a sentient pumpkin. I think that's quite a fun, if not a little bit silly idea, but the concept here that it's been, you know, this chemical plant that's seeped in the ground, all this kind of like goo, and it's created this kind of mutated pumpkin, obviously speaks to you know, issues out, you know, real world issues, I guess. But it's a fun idea, albeit it's clearly not a realistic idea, but it's a fun one. And this pumpkin straight away, even before it's really sort of come to life, is somewhat gnarly looking, you might say. I think the movie opens pretty strong. We actually have a kind of a sequence with the initial pumpkin attack, and then it kind of backtracks and kind of tells you the story leading up to that. But I think that initial sequence, it's even done in sort of partial found footage way, the opening sequence where this kind of news reporter is trying to capture it on film. I think actually does quite a good job of setting up a little bit more of a dangerous tone than this you might think with this kind of type of movie. So that was all sort of pretty fun. It is a somewhat fast-paced movie in many ways. This creature sprouts its tentacles as kind of legs and it's running around like some type of spider pumpkin hybrid. So it is quite a agile creature, you might say. So it plays a little bit like, you know, if there was like a wild lion or a dog or something like that, where people, you know, are huddled up and are kind of running for their lives. So think of it like that, in that kind of realm of the movie. So yeah, it's kind of a somewhat sort of fast-paced movie with this kind of dwindling group of survivors, you know, trying to outwit this thing, which seems to be sort of quite intelligent. And I think they actually give this pumpkin a little bit of a motivation. I've kind of hinted at what it is, but I thought that was kind of a fun idea, you know, with this kind of, you know, silly sort of concept. The movie is relatively low budget, but I've got to say, on a technical element here, I think it's kind of relatively well shot. And there are some sequences with the vines, for example, coming through the floor and stuff, where I think it's fairly kind of well put together on a technical level. So let's talk about what does not work in this movie. Okay, so this is going to be a film where its biggest crime is that it's super vanilla. This movie is so unremarkable in any way that it is maybe even worse than if it was bad, if that makes sense. You know, you might have a degree of apathy whilst watching this particular film, because it's never good at anything. It's never great. There's no sort of great set pieces. There's no great characters. There's no great VFX shots and things like that. It's all just very stereotypical, vanilla and generic. But also, there's not necessarily these super awkward, horrible moments in the movie. It just kind of comes across as a very mediocre movie, very lackluster. So that's really the kind of the running tone through the movie. But let me go into a little bit more detail here. I think the characters seem like such a group of stock characters. You know, the feisty young female who's got this guy that we obviously had spent a lot of time talking about relationship drama. Totally the reason why a viewer might be watching this movie. Yes, I mean, you might say it's characterization, but I didn't really think it was. I didn't really feel like you got to know these characters especially deeply. They just seem like such archetypes, you know. So the characters, they're not sort of necessarily badly drawn out, but they're just very unremarkable. The acting is unremarkable. It's fine. It's fine for a throwaway kind of movie, but again, the performances won't stay with you. The plot, you're just running around after this kind of creature, or it's running around after you. The initial concept of having this kind of pumpkin thing is fun, but then it just kind of acts like any other kind of like creature chasing a bunch of kind of young people around. Again, the plot, as I've kind of alluded to there, is nothing really you haven't kind of seen before. It's just kind of more of the same. The VFX are very CGI. There's a couple of sequences where we do have I think like a practical sort of pumpkin, but for the most part, it's when it's attacking people, it's using these kind of vines that sort of spears people, and it's all achieved through CGI, and it's noticeable CGI as well. So you can probably guess the budget here is relatively, you know, relatively low. And if we're being picky, let's be honest, these things, physics don't really play a big part in this movie, because I mean, this thing is like spearing people through the back of the skull with like a root, and it's just like, come on, you know, that come on. I mean, that would have to be made of steel to kind of like pierce someone's skull and kind of go through it in this kind of like quickly. You know, it's a bit just silly and kind of like goofy. I mean, this movie isn't trying to be serious, don't get me wrong, but again, it's just like, oh yeah, that's kind of like whatever. Everyone who you think is going to survive will survive. People who you think are going to die are going to die. It's just kind of super predictable, and I think it ended at a certain point, and it kind of carried on a little bit as well. So I actually think the movie came to its kind of natural conclusion, but then decided it wanted another 10 minutes, and I didn't necessarily think that was necessary. I felt more or less the kind of the story was kind of told. Overall, like I said, I think the worst crime here is this movie is just super lackluster. There's nothing here really that is going to really stand out in your mind as a memory after you've watched this. And if anything, I think the movie has a few detractors, like the kind of the poor CGI, the somewhat lack of originality, that, I've got to be honest with you, puts this movie at a below average movie without necessarily being a complete disaster. But I would suggest you're going to be feeling apathy after this one. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.